Hi, I wanted to take a moment today to talk about distance courses in rural western Kansas, what those look like from a technology angle, and how that interacts with the rural culture and communities. So there's three types of distance courses that I see used often in rural western Kansas. There are video conference online courses, asynchronous online courses, and open schedule courses. The video conference schedules online courses are oftentimes a course that's offered in person at a different school district that then students elsewhere will connect with via Google Hangouts. In my building where I teach, we offer our Spanish courses this way. The teacher is located at a district 30 miles away. Our students at the time of that class go to a room and they connect via Google Hangouts. The asynchronous online courses are a little bit more of what we imagine for an online course in a college setting. So oftentimes for our students, these are college level classes such as college algebra or English comp, where assignments are given for a week and have a due date, and but there are no actual times that they are online with the instructor at the same time. And then finally, open schedule courses, we have cases where we have courses that are a structure set up where there are deadlines, but the schedule is very flexible. So the deadlines are more goals in order to finish rather than a due date for an assignment. So the reason that rural schools use these courses is that one could be a required course for which there's not a qualified teacher in the district. So in my district, we need to offer Spanish courses to allow our students that wish to complete the Board of Regents curriculum. However, we do not have a qualified Spanish teacher in district. We also use distance courses to increase electives. With a limited faculty, it's difficult to offer a wide variety of electives, and so we have the opportunity to offer electives in things such as accounting or some extra business courses that we would not be able to offer in-house. We use them to offer college credit where we do not have a teacher who is qualified to teach dual credit, or for students who cannot travel to a campus itself because we're at least an hour from the nearest campus. And then finally, we use those courses for credit recovery. When there's a single section of a required class or just a couple sections of biology, it's often difficult for a student to participate in the class itself to recover a failed credit, and so we typically have to use a distance course in that setting. Now, to explain western Kansas a little bit, most counties in western Kansas, in particular the ones where I live and teach, are classified as frontier by the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. So that's actually a lower population density than rural. As a matter of perspective, the county where I live has 2.4 people per square mile. So if you took that same population density and applied it to Manhattan Island, there would be 55 people living on Manhattan Island. So it's extremely sparse. There are few, if any, degrees of separation from agriculture. So although certainly not everyone works on a farm, there's a very direct connection to agriculture and oil. And depending on the school district you look at, we are typically around 30% Hispanic and 70% white. So there is some ethnic diversity, which might be surprising for folks who don't actually or aren't familiar with the area. So if you are teaching a distance course with rural students in it, some things you need to consider. One is that internet access can be inconsistent, especially for students who live out of town or even in town itself. Internet access isn't a guaranteed, and even where there is a connection, it may be inconsistent. The new FCC guidelines, or this initiative to expand broadband into rural areas, actually changed the definition of what constitutes high-speed internet, and it changed it in such a way that 4G wireless access counts. So there are many students that could live in a place that on a map says it has high-speed internet access, but that access may be exclusively from their phone. So they may have a lot of difficulty working on assignments at home because their internet could be completely phone-based. Many students can be heavily involved in farm work still, so family farms require everyone to be involved, and so there are a lot of students that might be awake very early doing chores during particular times of the year. Could be very busy with things like harvest. And then finally, cultural events or even basic shopping can be quite a drive away. And so if you're asking a student to get a supply for a particular project or assignment, it would not be at all out of the question that it would take at least an hour or an hour and a half of driving each way for that student to be able to get that supply. Some cultural elements to consider. A lot of times rural communities get defined by what we lack, but one thing we typically have is very deep relationships. So there can be a very deep sense of community in these towns, and the relationships can be very deep. They can sometimes be generational deep, and so we base a lot of our perceptions of success on relationships. Now, with that, it can be very difficult to enter some of these communities as an outsider. In fact, I've kind of joked as someone that moved to a western Kansas town as an adult that I won't ever be from that town, but my kids eventually can. So entering a community can be difficult, and so as an instructor from the outside, you may not want to expect to be accepted as a member of this rural community. And then along with that, there can be something of a level of skepticism towards relevance. So someone from the outside, in rural communities, a lot of times we have a skepticism that if you are from outside the community, what do you really understand about my experience and what applies to me? Because many times what our experience in school and students' experience in school is they're dealing with curricula that are urban-centric. And so some of that skepticism is well-founded, and that's something that instructors of distance courses with rural students in them are going to need to consider. So a few practical suggestions if you're teaching a course with rural students in a distance course. Early in the course, ask about internet access and make sure you have a clear understanding of who does and does not have consistent internet access. Because not only can it be inconsistent, things such as coffee houses or libraries or places that in an urban or suburban setting someone might access the internet, those may not be available. So be sure to ask about that early on. Also, ask about scheduling in advance and be flexible about it. So where I live in western Kansas in the fall, there's a fall harvest, and that's a very busy time on farms. But fall harvest is something that's not typically it can't be scheduled. It's very dependent on weather and conditions. So you might have to be a little bit flexible on deadlines and understanding that depending on conditions and weather, you might have students who have to dedicate a few days or a week a very intensive effort to harvest to make sure that the crop gets harvested before more rain comes or whatever. And so you have to be sensitive to that. Now, where I said that there's some skepticism about relevance, it's important to allow students voice in creating their own relevance. You need to validate their experience in the rural community and allow them the opportunity to take their experiences and apply what they are learning to them. And then finally, you want to make sure that you give plenty of time if there are certain supplies that you need students to get or certain places you need them to visit. Like I said, it can be quite a distance to travel to get supplies, or we can be waiting on getting supplies shipped to us. And so something as simple as asking a student to have a piece of poster board for a class that week could actually be a kind of difficult barrier. So you make sure that you give plenty of time for things such as that.